so thank you in advance for any kind of feedback or comments that you would post. Anticipating a number of questions, taking the experience from my previous posts, I thought that maybe it would be good to explain how this thing is built up and how it works. It may seem complex, but in reality it's quite simple. So first, the audio sources. We have 3 audio sources here. We have the Elektron DIGITAKT, that is mostly drums. Specifically the bass drum comes from DIGITAKT. You'll see later why it's important. Then you have the DIGITONE. DIGITONE does mostly atmospheres and pads. And then you have this little box, MC101, which I think is one of the most underrated instruments at the moment. Why? Because DIGITAKT, this is DIGITAKT MK1, although it has 8 lanes of samples and you can really play with those samples, you know, each step can have its own sample. It's actually a mono machine. Each lane is mono. You can widen it using reverbs or delays, you can pan it, but in essence it's mono. And DIGITONE, although it's an amazing FM synth that can produce incredible textures, like this pad. However, still, it doesn't have that, you know, classic analog subtractive kind of synthesis. And I felt like I wanted to have that, especially for basses and the pads. So what MC101 gives me is exactly that. I can have 4 instruments, all of them stereo. I can have a classic drum machine here with all of the sounds of the classic drum machine. I can have a beautiful, beautiful pad here with Juno chorus emulation. Just listen to this. Amazing. I can have an analog sounding subtractive synthesis bass here. And I can even have a full-on stereo loop on another channel. I have this organic loop here. Yeah, all this with very granular processing on each channel. You can do EQ, you can do separate effects on each channel. Beautiful, beautiful machine. So what happens with these 3 sound sources? Well, DIGITAKT comes with a stereo channel into BlueBox by 1010 Music. DIGITONE, again with a stereo channel, goes into Polara. Polara is a versatile reverb pedal, so this time it does shimmer. So everything coming out of DIGITONE goes through shimmer and comes in another channel on BlueBox. And MC101, again, a stereo channel from MC101 goes straight into another channel on the BlueBox. BlueBox has 6 stereo inputs. So what happens here? Here, I group these 3 channels, 3 stereo channels, into 2 stems. One is a drum stem that comes out of one of the outputs, and another one is synths, atmospheres, loop stem that comes through another stereo channel. These 2 stereo stems arrive into Octatrack, where I use the amazing FX template by EasyPod, which does a couple of things. First of all, of course, I can apply a fix. And you have 16 kinds of FX that you could use. Some of them are really drastic. That one was based on a loop. So you see, they're quite intense. I use a more subtle one. But another thing that Octatrack does for me, remember, I have 2 stems. One stem is with the drums, the other one is with the synths and the loops and the bass. And the second stem goes through a pseudo sidechain compression. There is an LFO on a 5th channel, and using the depth, you can define how much sidechain compression happens there. It's not really a sidechain compression because Octatrack does not listen to the drum sound, to the bass drum. Basically ducks the sound of these 2 instruments on every 4th bit. I'm going to demonstrate it right now. This is a bit more drastic. Yeah, I keep it right here. I know that Octatrack can be used for so many things, but in this particular setup, I use it as an FX and as a processor that basically does sidechain for all the instrumentals, and then it also allows me to apply a fix. Now the sound coming from the Octatrack goes into Max by Universal Audio, which is an amazing pedal that has a couple of compressors, analog compressors that can run simultaneously any way you like it. I'm using just one of them, and I'm using the LA to A for a gentle compression. There is a fairly gentle compression here, nothing too drastic, to tighten up the sound. And this compressed sound then goes into analog heat as a final processor, where I apply a little drive to the sound. I also do a bit of EQ, and I use the low boost method, where you use a high pass filter. So you cut the sound from below, from the low frequencies, and at the same time you boost the resonance a little bit to accentuate the frequencies that you want to use. It's really, really subtle here. And then this whole sound, processed sound, goes back into BlueBox on another input. Now, if you remember, the first three inputs I use for sound sources, and I group them in two stems, but the final processed sound goes into mains out. Now, what this allows me to do is to actually record every instrument separately before the FX and the sidechain done by Octatrack, but also it allows me to record the whole mix. This gives a lot of freedom afterwards. You know, if you're not happy with the way it's mixed, you can tweak each instrument separately or mix it again all together in a DAW or just the way you like it. For today's jam, however, I just recorded the final sum with all the FX just to demonstrate how the thing works. Now, another thing to bear in mind if you plan to build your own rave in a case, I call it rave in a case because I basically have everything I need here, and maybe more. I would say that for this particular jam, I've used maybe a 60% of what this rig can do. I didn't use all the lanes, I didn't do a lot of automations, I could be a bit more creative on the MC 101, so really, I didn't even touch the limit of the capabilities of this particular setup. So if you want to build your rave in a case, I'm going to give you a few practical advices. Now this one is built in a Magma XL Lite DJ case, and hence the name XL Lite. The case is pretty light, so I had to reinforce it with a sheet of plywood that goes at the bottom of the case. It's an 1 centimeter 8 millimeter plywood, so it reinforces the case, but it also provides me with the ground on which I'm placing all the instruments. Now the Elektron boxes are mounted on fairly simple, probably the cheapest TV mounts, TV VESA standard mounts. They have a bit of pivot, so I can play with the pivot here, just like a TV on the wall. Really the cheapest you find, just make sure that they're low profile. There are plenty of mounts that have an additional hand that can open. No, you need the simplest one that just has one element that goes into the wall and then another element that goes on top with maybe just one axis of play. So the three Elektron boxes are mounted on these VESA stands, but the other instruments are mounted on pedestals, just like this one here. These are just wooden blocks. Why do I do that? First is to level the surface of the instruments, because for instance BlueBox, it's fairly thin, so if it was on the bottom it would be quite lower. But the second, which is I think more important, it allows you to run all the cable management and hide the power supplies under the gear. So Elektron's Octatrack power supply is under it. The power supplies for DIGITAKT, DIGITONE and analog kit is also under it. So this really allows you to use this bottom floor as a cable management level. And then some of the instruments are not placed on pedestals, but placed on utility boxes. For instance, in terms of Midi, DIGITAKT is the brain of the whole setup. So there is one Midi line going into a Midi Thru box that is actually underneath the UA Max pedal. And it has 4 outputs. One of the outputs goes into the DIGITONE, another one in MC101, and the third one goes into the Octatrack, but the fourth one goes out. This allows me to synchronize with other artists if we decide to play together, or if I decide to bring and maybe sample some instruments using the DIGITAKT or using the MC101, that can also be a sampler. I can always, let me check that. I'm not sure if it can be a sampler, but at least DIGITAKT for sure. So I can always use this extra Midi line to synchronize with external gear, or basically to synchronize the external gear to my setup, to send clock and send maybe note information and even program changes. Yeah, so you have to really be creative how you place the pedestals and the utilities, because I don't need access to my Midi box. It's a simple Midi Thru box, maybe this big. I just need it to be there to do its thing, but I don't really need access. It doesn't have any dials, any parameters. And then finally the power supply. I have this power strip here that has 2 USB power sources. Initially I thought that I could use both of them because I have BlueBox getting power from USB, and MC101 is also getting power from USB. So I was hoping I could use both of them, but it seems that on most power strips, if you use 2 audio boxes and you power them by the same plugs on this power strip, almost inevitably you're gonna get the ground loop issues, all sorts of sounds, hisses and noises. That's exactly what I got. I can understand you have the BlueBox that is a mixer powered by this USB out, but then you have MC101 that is a sound source powered from the same plug going into the mixer. Even cabling wise, it makes sense that there would be a ground loop. So what I'm doing here, I'm using one of the plugs to power, one of the USB plugs to power BlueBox, and then I use a separate USB power supply to run MC101, and this helps. The noise that you hear at the beginning, it's the ground noise lifted by several stages of compression and distortion. Obviously, there is a very light compression happening here on the EasyBots FX template, but there is also some important compression, hefty compression happening in the Universal Audio Max, and then there is a bit of drive happening in the Elektron analog kit. So that's absolutely normal, and I honestly like it. This noise, this ground noise gives the feeling of analog sound. Yeah, so I hope it makes it a bit clearer for you. The way I designed it, I first took the measurements of the case directly from the store where I bought it first, modeled for myself in 2D in Adobe Illustrator, doing graphic design, so it was a bit easier for me. Modeled the interior space of the case, then placed all the gear and all the pedestals and just managed the space best I could. It works. Whenever I want to close the lid closes. However, I need to unplug a couple of cables here, specifically the power supplies for Elektron boxes. Then I would probably need to unplug some of the USB cables here, but that's a very little hassle. But then it closes. All the gear is set on Velcros, except for the DigiTrio. These ones, they are mounted directly on the VESA mounts, so yeah, they're pretty sturdy. But the rest of the gear is set on the typical Velcro strips, pedal Velcro strips. Yeah, and there are some cable management elements at the bottom just to help me make sense how the cables run. I hope it makes it a bit clearer for you, and I honestly hope that it inspires you to build your own rave in a case. If you do so, please let me know. Please share a link to your build. On the way to build it, if you have any questions, feel free to address me. I'd be very happy to help you out. Yeah, and thank you again for being with me on this one. And I see you in the next video. Thank you so much.